Good afternoon, brothers. Good afternoon, Father Jerry. My topic for this afternoon is the early church in the Apostolic era. The early church in the Apostolic era, more than any other epoch of history, the time of the founding and establishment of the church in the initial apostolic era was of decisive consequence for its historical development. After the ascension of Christ, the disciples were confronted with a totally new situation. To be sure, the departing master had left them an unequivocal mission, the content of which was the continuation of the preaching of the salvation and the proclamation of the gospel. The message of the eschatological kingdom of Christ. It seems that concrete directions were not provided. However, regarding their future life together and concerning the details of the organizational structure of their community. With respect to Christ's wishes in this regard, the opinions of exegetes vary considerably. But if Protestant theologians want to paint a contrast between what Christ really wanted and what actually developed, it must be pointed out that the apostles and the first disciples, who after all were eye and ear witness of his revelation, certainly must have been in a better position to interpret the will of Jesus than contemporary scholars 2,000 years later. Here are some slides for in the life after the ascension of Christ. Saint Peter the Apostle. He was chosen by Christ as the leader of the group. Upon the betrayal and death of Judas, one of his first tasks was to lead in the apostles. Selection of a replacement of their disgraced colleague. The group chose Matthias. Peter was sanctioned by the Sanhedrin, imprisoned by Herod. Tradition says Peter founded a church in Rome with Paul and was later crucified there. It is said he insisted he be crucified upside down as he felt unworthy to perish in the same way as his Savior. His remains are beneath the high altar of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Saint Andrew. He was Peter's brother. He traveled far from the Holy Land during his mission. It is said that he preached around the Black Sea, arriving as far north as the Ukraine, Romania, and Russia. He established the See of Byzantium. He was martyred on an X-shaped cross in Patras, Greece. After being flogged, stories say he continued to preach for 2 days before expiring of the instrument of his destruction. His remains have been divided among churches in Patras, Amalfi, Edinburgh, and Warsaw, as well as many other places. Saint James the Great, the son of Zebedee. This James was the brother of John and the first apostles to be martyred. Tradition says he was decapitated by Herod himself. It is said he preached in Liberia, Spain, as well as the Holy Land. Upon his death, his followers took his remains back to Spain, where was buried at Santiago de Compostela. The Catholic Church does not necessarily ascribe to the nation that James ever actually worked in Spain, but the legend has persisted since 700 AD. Saint John the Evangelist, often referred to as the disciple whom Jesus loved. John was the youngest of the apostles. He is the only one of the apostles to die of old age. Though stories abound of the many times he was persecuted and tortured, it is believed that it is he who authored several books of the New Testament, though there are those that say some were written by another John. John was banished by the Romans to the island of Patmos. John's tomb is in the remains of the Basilica of St. John in Ephesus, near modern Selçuk, Turkey. Saint Philip the Apostle. He went to preach in Greece, Syria, and Phrygia, having converted the wife of the proconsul of Rome in Hierapolis. The angry official condemned Philip to torture and crucifixion. Another story says he was beheaded, though it is agreed his relics are in the crypt of the Church of Sancti Apostoli in Rome. A 2011 archaeological dig in Hierapolis unearthed his original tomb. Saint Bartholomew the Apostle, also known as Nathaniel. Bartholomew is said to have gone to India, Ethiopia, Mesopotamia, Parthia, Ligagonig, and Armenia. He is considered to be one of the patron saints of the American Apostolic Church. Tradition says he was flayed alive and beheaded in Albanapolis, Armenia, but another account places his martyrdom in India. His relics are found in the Cathedral of Saint Bartholomew in Benevento, Italy. Another relic is in San Bartolomeo al-Isola in Rome. The site of a hospital as Bartholomew is a protector of medicine in hospitals. Saint Matthew the Evangelist. As a tax collector, Matthew was literate in Aramaic and Greek, though the gospel that bears his name is anonymous. His authorship has been ascribed since the 2nd century. Most scholars agree that he preached in the Holy Land but cannot come to consensus on where else in the world he traveled. It is interesting to note that Muslim texts place his missionary work around the Caspian Sea. There are conflicting stories about his martyrdom, but his relics are found in the Cathedral of Salerno. Saint James the Less. The son of Alphaeus, this James is only mentioned 4 times in the Gospel. One account of his martyrdom has him thrown from the temple wall in Jerusalem. The same one where Satan took Jesus during the episode of the temptation, surviving and then beaten to death with a fuller's club. Another story has him crucified in Egypt. Saint Thomas the Apostle, also known as the Doubter. He traveled to India about 20 years after Christ's death. He established 7 churches in Kerala, southwest India, and descendants of those he baptized there proudly trace their lineage to those first converts. He is known as the Apostle of India. He was martyred during his mission in southwestern India. Some scholars believe he might have traveled to Indonesia. His remains were brought to Edessa in Mesopotamia but have been divided and moved several times in 1258. A portion made its way to the city of Ortona in Italy. Saint Simon the Zealot. To distinguish him from Simon Peter, he often is referred to as Simon the Zealot. After working in Egypt, he joined Jude in Persia and Armenia. Different legends say he was crucified as the Bishop of Jerusalem. Son in Hap in Persia died peacefully in Edessa. In others says he was martyred with Jude. Saint Jude Thaddeus, usually pictured with the flame of Pentecost over his head. Jude preached in Judea, Samaria, Idumea, Syria, Mesopotamia, Beirut, and Libya. He was martyred around 65 AD in Beirut with Simon the Zealot. His body was later brought to Rome and lies in St. Peter's Basilica. He is known as the patron of the lost causes and, of course, is the patron of the famous Children's Hospital and Research Center in Memphis, Tennessee. Last but not the least, Saint Matthias the Apostle. He is unique because he wasn't personally chosen by Jesus but by the other apostles upon the death of Judas Iscariot. He went on to preach in Cappadocia and the area of the Caspian Sea. He was stoned to death in what today is the country of Georgia. What picture of the church does the early apostolic Christian period provide? The Acts of the Apostles and the epistles of Paul clearly demonstrate that from the beginning of the early church, the spiritual office was regarded as an essential structural element of community order. A constitution based on a purely charismatic and free spiritual force without offices, without rule of law, and without a firm body of faith never existed and is incompatible with the Pauline church concept. This is the truth for the local community as well as for the whole church, just as the first apostles received their official appointment to spread the gospel from Christ himself. So they in turn also laid hands on their special associates and successors in official appointment. The organization of the early communities was not informed, but always contained the structural principle of the unity head and the body. The officials are appointed and called to represent the spiritual master and to continue in his name. The work of salvation by the word and sacrament, they exercise the governing functions alone by virtue of the work of salvation by word and sacrament. They exercise the governing functions alone by virtue of their office, but be it in the service of the whole church as apostles, prophets, and evangelists, or in the service of the local community as bishops, elders, deacons, teachers, and shepherds. A rigorous gradation governs everywhere based on the principle of succession in office as derived from Christ and the apostles. The function of office was not opposed to that of charisma, which was a gift of God for the accomplishment of special tasks. Often we encounter those in office who were charismatics at the same time. And conversely, charismatic were entrusted with the guidance of a community. Paul himself was a preeminent and charismatic, yet as an office holder, he was sober and impartial enough to know that his newly founded communities were in need of observant, realistic, and strict authoritative guidance. The charismatic had to subordinate themselves to their office in the normal direction of the church. More and more, the ordinary direction of the community was concentrated in the bishops and deacons. These are some pictures of the early Christians. They were when they are martyred. Okay, that's all. Thank you.